November 14, 1948, 3:12 a.m. Corner of 135th Street and Lenox Avenue. The rain in Harlem didn't wash away the sins, it just made the pavements slick with them. Under the yellow haze of a flickering street lamp, a burlap sack sat propped against a fire hydrant. It wasn't garbage, it was a message. Inside was the body of young Silas Shorty Green, a runner for the policy banks, his throat cut with surgical precision from ear to ear. Pinned to his chest with a jagged, rusted nail was a playing card, the Jack of Diamonds, eyes scratched out. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stepped out of his black Cadillac, ignoring the freezing drizzle. He didn't look at the crowd gathering in the shadows, he looked at the sack. This was the third body in 10 days. No demands for money, no turf war declarations. Just dead boys left on Bumpy's corners like discarded toys. The killer was mocking the king of Harlem. "Police are 3 minutes out, Bumpy," his bodyguard Red Dillard whispered, checking his watch. "We gotta leave it." Bumpy lit a cigar, the flame illuminating a face carved from granite. "No," he said, his voice low and terrifying. "Put him in the trunk." The trunk. "Bumpy, that's evidence. That's a capital crime." "Put him in the trunk," Bumpy repeated, ash falling into the rain. "The man who did this wants attention. I'm going to give him a front row seat to his own funeral." 2 weeks earlier, by the autumn of 1948, Bumpy Johnson was the undisputed professor of the Harlem underworld. He had survived the wars with Dutch Schultz and navigated the treacherous waters of the Genovese family alliance. He walked the streets not as a thug, but as a dignitary. He paid rents for widows, settled disputes between merchants, and ensured that the chaotic violence of the 1930s was replaced by a strictly ordered system of numbers running. Order was Bumpy's currency. If the streets were quiet, everyone made money. If the streets were bloody, the police cracked down and the cash flow dried up. But 1948 was a fragile time. The post-war heroin boom was threatening to breach Harlem's borders, bringing with it a new breed of criminal men who didn't care about the community or the code. Bumpy had staunchly refused to allow the widespread sale of skag in his territory, a moral line in the sand that cost the downtown five families millions. Tension was high. Every shadow seemed to hold a knife. Into this powder keg stepped a ghost. The body started dropping on November 4th. First, a jazz drummer who owed a small gambling debt. Then, a shopkeeper who paid protection. Now a runner. The killer wasn't stealing money. He was stealing Bumpy's authority. By leaving the bodies in high-visibility locations outside the Apollo, near the subway station, and now at 135th the killer was broadcasting a signal. "Bumpy Johnson cannot protect you." The neighborhood was terrified. The numbers runners were refusing to go out. The economic engine of Harlem was stalling. Bumpy knew this wasn't just a serial killer, it was a strategic dismantling of his reputation. The man wielding the knife was known only as the Butcher of Brighton, a freelance psychopath named Arthur Frawley. Frawley was an anomaly in the organized crime world. He didn't do it for business. He did it for the art of the kill. Rumored to have been a medic in the Pacific Theater who lost his mind in the jungle, Frawley had a reputation for anatomical curiosity. He was a ghost, living in transient hotels, moving with the silence of a vapor. Frawley had been hired by a rogue faction of the Gambino family, specifically a capo named Sal the Snake Palmieri. Palmieri wanted Harlem, but he knew he couldn't win a shooting war against Bumpy's army. His plan was psychological. Unleash a monster to terrorize the populace until they lost faith in Bumpy, then swoop in as the savior who could stop the killing. Frawley was the perfect instrument of terror. He didn't want territory, he just wanted to carve. Frawley was dangerous because he was unpredictable. He didn't follow the patterns of a mob hitman. He didn't use guns, he used a straight razor and a bone saw. In Chicago, 3 years prior, he had single-handedly dismantled a local crew by leaving pieces of them in their boss's mailbox. He had no permanent address, no family, and no fear. He had killed 12 men before arriving in New York. The ultimatum wasn't spoken. It was written in blood. The card pinned to Shorty Green's chest was the final insult. The Jack of Diamonds represented wealth, Bumpy's wealth. Scratching the eyes out was a clear message: "I am watching you, but you cannot see me." Frawley was daring Bumpy to catch a shadow. November 14th, 4:45 a.m. The Hotel Theresa was the Waldorf of Harlem, a towering symbol of black excellence and nightlife. But the penthouse suite, usually reserved for visiting dignitaries and jazz legends, was currently occupied by Arthur Frawley. He sat in a velvet armchair, cleaning his fingernails with the very razor he had used 2 hours earlier. He had a bottle of expensive bourbon and a view of the rainy skyline. He felt like a dod. He assumed Bumpy was currently running around in circles, dealing with the police in the panic. 4:52 a.m. The hallway outside the penthouse was quiet. Thick carpet swallowed footsteps. Frawley's door was locked, bolted, and guarded by his own paranoia. He heard a soft click, not at the door, but from the service elevator down the hall. He paused, razor hovering over his thumb. He listened. Silence. He went back to his drink. 4:55 a.m. A heavy thud against the door startled him, then another. It sounded like dead weight being thrown against the wood. Frawley stood up, gripping a razor. He moved to the door, listening. "Room service," a deep voice rumbled. Frawley scoffed. "Get lost. I insist," the voice said. 4:56 a.m. The door didn't burst open. The lock cylinder simply popped inward with a deafening metallic crack, driven by a sledgehammer. The door swung open. Bumpy Johnson stood there. He was unarmed. He wore a pristine charcoal suit. Behind him, Red Dillard and a huge man named Big Sam were carrying something heavy wrapped in a bloody tarp. Frawley backed up, eyes darting to the window. "You make a mistake coming here, Johnson." Bumpy didn't speak. He walked into the room, took the bottle of bourbon from the table, poured himself a glass, and sat on the sofa. "Put it on the table," Bumpy commanded. 4:58 a.m. Big Sam heaved the wet, bloody tarp onto the mahogany coffee table. It landed with a sickening wet slap. The smell of copper and rain filled the luxurious suite instantly. Frawley stared at the tarp. He knew the shape. "What is this?" Frawley hissed, his composure cracking. "Open it," Bumpy said. Frawley hesitated. "You're crazy. Open it." Frawley reached out with the razor, slicing the twine. The tarp fell away. There lay Shorty Green. His eyes were open, staring blindly at the ceiling. The jack of diamonds was still pinned to his chest. The wound on his neck was a gaping mouth. 5:05 a.m. The room went silent. The only sound was the rain lashing against the window pane. Bumpy took a sip of bourbon. "You forgot something," he said softly. Frawley looked at the body, then at Bumpy. "I don't leave clues. You left the most important one." Bumpy stood up and walked to the corpse. He didn't look away. He reached into the pocket of Shorty's blood-soaked jacket. Frawley watched, mesmerized by the violation of his own art. Bumpy pulled out a small silver object. It was a lighter. A distinct, gold-plated lighter with initials engraved on it. Frawley touched his own pocket. His lighter was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. What Frawley didn't know was that the lighter wasn't his. The setup. Bumpy had never seen Frawley's lighter. He didn't need to. When Bumpy saw the body on the corner at 3:12 a.m., he realized something. The killer was arrogant. Arrogant men like trophies. Arrogant men watch their handiwork. Bumpy had his men canvass the hotels immediately, looking for a single man checking in at odd hours, ordering room service, and paying cash. The Hotel Theresa staff, loyal to Bumpy, flagged the guest in 7B, who requested extra towels and bleach at 4 a.m. The counter preparation, Bumpy knew he couldn't just kill Frawley. If Frawley disappeared, the Gambinos would just send another butcher. Bumpy needed a confession. He needed to know exactly who signed the checks so he could cut the head off the snake. The lighter Bumpy pulled from the corpse's pocket, it was a prop. A gold lighter Bumpy had taken from his own pocket and palmed while pretending to search the body. It was a magician's trick. The execution, Bumpy tossed the lighter to Frawley. Frawley caught it. He looked at the initials. E.J. Ellsworth Johnson. Frawley looked up, confused. "This is yours." "It is now," Bumpy said. He pulled a pistol from his waistband, not to shoot, but to eject the magazine. He placed the gun on the table next to the dead boy's hand. "Here's the story, Arthur," Bumpy began, his voice hypnotic. "You and Shorty here got into a lover's quarrel. Tragically, you cut his throat. But before he died, Shorty shot you." Bumpy nodded to Big Sam. Sam stepped forward, grabbing Frawley by the neck with one massive hand. "Wait!" Frawley screamed. "I work for Palmieri, Sal Palmieri. He paid me $5 grand." Bumpy held up a hand. Sam froze. Palmery, Bumpy mused. That's a name, but a name isn't enough. I need proof. Bumpy reached into the dead boy's other pocket and pulled out a heavy, black telephone receiver that had been ripped from the wall downstairs. He placed it on the bloody chest of the corpse. Call him. What? Call Palmieri. Right now. Tell him the job is done. Tell him Bumpy Johnson is broken. Frawley's hand shook as he dialed the number. The dead body of his victim lay between him and his salvation. He held the phone to his ear. Yeah? It's Artie, Frawley stammered into the receiver. It's done. Johnson is finished. Yeah, the money? Okay. Bumpy listened. He nodded. Then he took the phone from Frawley's hand and spoke into it. Hello, Sal, Bumpy said. You hired a butcher. I'm sending him back to you, in pieces. He hung up. November 14th, 5:15 a.m., Frawley dropped to his knees. The psychological weight of the dead body, the trick with the lighter, and the realization that Bumpy had played him like a fiddle crushed him. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a man in a room with people who were going to kill him. Please, Frawley begged. I'll leave town. Believe down. I'll leave town. Bumpy looked at the corpse of Shorty Green. You spilled blood on my street. You made mothers afraid to let their children play outside. You don't get to leave town. Bumpy signaled Red Dillard. Two loud cracks echoed in the suite. Frawley slumped forward, his head resting on the table next to Shorty's legs. November 14th, 7 a.m. The police arrived at the Hotel Theresa. They found a gruesome scene, a murder-suicide. The narrative, carefully constructed by Bumpy's placement of evidence, was that Frawley and Shorty had been engaged in a deal gone wrong. The police, paid well by Bumpy to accept the obvious solution, closed the case by lunch. The ripple effects were immediate. Sal Palmieri, the Gambino capo, received a package that afternoon. It contained the Jack of Diamonds, clean of blood, and a single chess piece, a black knight. Palmieri understood. His instrument of terror had been turned against him. The Gambino leadership, embarrassed by Palmieri's failure and the exposure, stripped him of his rank. The encroachment into Harlem stopped dead. Bumpy paid for Shorty Green's funeral personally. It was one of the largest Harlem had ever seen. He stood at the graveside, a silent guardian. The message was clear. Bumpy Johnson protects his own, even in death. The night of the Hotel Theresa became a grim legend in the Harlem underworld. It showcased a side of Bumpy Johnson that was rarely seen, the psychological torturer. He didn't just outgun his enemies, he outthought them. He used the macabre of the dead body as a prop in a play to force a confession. Most gangsters would have hidden the body. Bumpy weaponized it. This story reveals the depth of Bumpy's intellect. He understood that fear is a currency, but confusion is a weapon. By disrupting Frawley's reality, making him believe he had left evidence, forcing him to confront his victim Bumpy, broke the killer's mind before he took his life. Universal lesson. In any high-stakes confrontation, the person who controls the environment controls the outcome. Bumpy brought the evidence of the crime to the criminal, reversing the power dynamic instantly. He showed that true power isn't about hiding your sins, it's about forcing your enemies to own theirs. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button. Like this video if you think Bumpy was the ultimate strategist. Comment below, could you have sat at that table with the body? Next week, the true story of how Bumpy Johnson escaped a police dragnet by dressing as a woman.